Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly and permanently ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Monday. And I have to tell you, my friends, I am ecstatic to be back behind the microphone. You guys don't quite understand how much I miss you when I'm gone. To go from being able to talk to you whenever I want, whenever I feel like it, to having to take a break. Well, it takes its toll on me, but I'm happy to be back, and we've got a lot to talk about. I kind of took a break during the honeymoon vacation, tried to stay away from the news and social media, but I did catch a couple of glimpses. And where I want to start this morning is something that it deeply affected me, my friends. As you all know, I am a motorcycle enthusiast, and in my not so humble opinion, there is only one motorcycle that one should buy: a Harley Davidson. I've owned 3 of them, and they are fantastic machines. But there was a report out, and I believe it was broke by Glenn Beck over the past week, that the corporate offices of Harley Davidson have pretty much gone woke. And I guess it goes to figure, there's a lot of these companies that get pretty screwed up at the top. But I want to provide a little bit of perspective for you on the whole Harley Davidson situation. Several months ago, perhaps a year ago, Harley came out and they said, we're going to focus our attention on our fashion clothing line. To Harley enthusiasts like myself, we kind of scratched our heads and went, what the heck are you talking about? Yeah, if you go into any Harley shop, you're going to see lots of high-end clothes. I guess high-end biker clothes. And if you've owned a Harley, or if you've ever spent any time in a Harley shop, you know that HD does not stand for Harley Davidson. It stands for hundreds of dollars, which is pretty much what everything costs in a Harley shop. But the announcement came out, and they said, we're going to focus on our high-end clothing line. And most bikers went, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And there was a big revolt that maybe you should focus on making motorcycles. That might be a good thing. And so they backed off of it. And it only took, maybe a month. And so even Harley Davidson, one of the oldest brands in America, probably one of the most, what I would consider one of the most American brands in America, even above Ford and Chevy. They've been making motorcycles since 1903. So, come on, long time American brand. Well, now they've decided that they're going to be woke, and they've sent their high-up employees to diversity training. If you're white, apparently you had to go to some sort of sensitivity training that you're implicitly biased, even though, you may not have a racist bone in your body, but because you're white, well, yeah, then you do. And they did all the woke stuff that you would imagine that any of these corporations would do. And it's become, public now, what they're doing. Now, I can hardly imagine that there's a single biker out there that looks at all this woke stuff and says, yeah, I'm in. I don't think so. And so what's going to happen here is a revolt against Harley Davidson, I think. Now, think about some of the other boycotts, right? Levi's, Pepsi, Yeti coolers, Bud Light. That's probably the most famous one. There's a big difference between a Harley Davidson motorcycle and a case of Bud Light that you're not going to buy. To buy a brand new motorcycle, you're probably talking upwards of high $20,000s, low $30,000, depending on which model you get. So there's a big difference there, and I would be shocked if I saw people blowing up their Harleys in response to this. But what I do think you're going to see is a serious decline in the sales of new bikes. Although I'm not a fan of Indian motorcycles, they make a fine motorcycle. I just personally, I don't like the way they look. I don't like the way they sound. No, they're not a Harley. And then, I mean, there's a long history between Indian motorcycles and Harley Davidson. That if you're a history buff like me, you're going to you're probably pretty acutely aware of how Indian motorcycles tried to destroy Harley Davidson, stole all their patents. So long history there. However, they do make a good motorcycle, and there's a lot of foreign-made motorcycles that are, I mean, they're not a Harley, but they're still pretty nice. So I'm thinking you're going to see kind of a revolt against Harley Davidson, and I'm sad to see it. I happen to own a 2003, and so I when the lovely Mrs. New Mrs. Iverson and I were talking about it, I said, well, it's not like we're going to buy a new Harley Davidson. We just have an old one from when Harley Davidson wasn't woke. Maybe this has to go into the category of I'm an Eagle Scout from back when that actually meant something. It wasn't all woke and all of this crap. But I think that the timing of this is interesting. Glenn Beck and his researcher, I can't remember the guy's name. I'll have to look it up during the break. But they timed it right. So this came out right before Sturgis. And I can't imagine that this whole woke stuff is going to be too popular at the Sturgis motorcycle rally. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of news coming out about this, and maybe Harley will come to their mind. I hope that come to their senses. I hope they do. But for right now, I'm deeply disappointed. Now, I did go and visit a Harley shop, and we were in Utah during the honeymoon, and I went right up to the sales counter or the service counter. And I said, hey, I'm a journalist, and I need to talk to you about this whole woke business that's going on. And the ladies behind the counter, they were equally shocked. They had some choice words to say about all of this woke stuff. And they said, well, we are definitely not woke here. And she said, this Harley shop, and again, it was the one in Utah, is independently owned. In fact, I think most Harley shops are independently owned, like they buy all their products there. But you're still selling a brand. And you're still participating in that the Harley corporate structure. So, I mean, it's going to be kind of hard to get away from that. And again, philosophically, I got a big problem with this. I am a Harley enthusiast, and the motorcycle is one of my prized possessions. So, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm deeply disappointed in Harley Davidson. Also, there was the Kamala Harris news that came out. Apparently, Joe Biden, or the people around him, finally told him that Joe Biden, you are not running for president. You're going to destroy the whole kit and caboodle. And so he stepped out, and now Kamala has stepped in to the nomination. Now, there are a lot of problems with this. First of all, not a single vote has been cast in this election for Kamala Harris. Not one. Nope. She didn't go through the primaries. She didn't win the primaries. Now, okay, I guess you could make an argument that said, well, she's on the ticket, so therefore all of those primary wins go to Kamala Harris. But I don't think so. The guy on the top of the ticket was Joe Biden, and voters, selected him to be their next presidential nominee on the Democrat side. And more important than that, I think probably, is all the donors that gave money to Joe Biden. They didn't give any of that cash to Kamala Harris. They gave it to Joe Biden. So how is it that Kamala Harris can just step in and take over all those donations and take command of all of the votes that Biden won in the primary? The Democrat Party works differently than the Republican Party in a lot of different respects, but I don't see how Kamala Harris can step into that role at all and take control of it. But I saw a little bit about that in the media. Of course, it hasn't been that long since the Democrats replaced Joe with Kamala. But I think you're going to see some more of that, questioning of how she can get into that role and how she can take control of all of that campaign money when none of it was given to her. So the people that are always shouting from the rooftops about democracy have replaced a candidate in the most undemocratic way. I mean, of course, it's completely in line with what Democrats normally do. They don't give a crap about hypocrisy. I guess none of us should be all that surprised about it. But let's kind of get into the weeds a little bit with this whole Kamala situation. And it hasn't been that long since even Barack Obama was not very hot on Kamala Harris. This is an article from, where did I get this? Oh, anyway, it's entitled Hope and Cringe. Obama endorses woman he belittled with a sexualized remark. The former president of the United States is accused of fostering a work environment that marginalized and ignored women. And I quote, Barack Obama, the celebrity memoirist and Netflix producer, who also served as president of the United States, has finally endorsed Kamala Harris this week amid reports that he doubted her ability to beat Donald Trump. The endorsement is notable because of the sexualized comments Obama made about Harris at a fundraiser in 2013, several years before the Me Too movement exposed how arrogant men routinely belittle successful women by obsessing over their looks. Here's what he said, and I quote, "You have to be careful. First of all, say she is brilliant," Obama said at an Atherton, California home of John Goldman, heir to the Levi Strauss denim fortune. She also happens to be, by far, the best-looking attorney general in the country. Kamala Harris is here. Obama eventually apologized to Harris, who was not yet married at the time, for his belittling and sexualized remarks, which were widely condemned as misogynistic. It was hardly the first time Obama was called out for his sexist behavior. For example, numerous female White House staffers accused him of fostering a, quote, work atmosphere that marginalizes and ignores women. Several months after the Harris incident, Obama was caught blatantly flirting with then Danish Prime Minister Helle Thorning-Schmidt at a memorial service for Nelson Mandela, while his controversial wife, Michelle, looked on in disgust. Michelle also endorsed Harris this week. The former first couple called the vice president, who just happened to be surrounded by cameras and boom mics, to capture the moment for posterity, or for a Netflix documentary. Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office, Obama told Harris over the phone. This means so much to me, Harris replied, and we're going to have some fun with this too, aren't we? Uh-huh. There's going to be some people that have some fun with the Kamala Harris candidacy, but I don't know that it's going to be Kamala Harris. I cannot wait to put together the Kamala Harris gaffe reel. It'll be somewhat longer than the Joe Biden gaffe reel because she's not in it. She doesn't usually use small sound bites, but it's going to be just as fun to put together. Well, let's take a quick break, and then we'll continue with Kamala's record on the economy after a brief and incredibly obnoxious profit timeout. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy, State Politics Live on the Independence Network. and on the Ditto Cam and on Facebook and Twitter and anywhere else you can find Cowboy State Politics. You can also stream it right from the Cowboy State Politics website on the Ditto Cam. Just look for the link that says live right up there. So from City Journal, and this is not something that I quote all that often, but there's an interesting discussion of Kamala Harris's record on the economy. It's actually kind of fascinating. Let me just quote the first couple paragraphs to you. And I quote, while Joe Biden campaigned as a moderate, he has governed as one of the most progressive presidents in modern American history. In 2020, Biden sought to distance himself from the declared socialist Bernie Sanders after Biden as president pursued massive stimulus and spending programs. Sanders became one of his biggest supporters. Now that Biden has announced that he will no longer pursue re-election, the Democratic nomination will likely fall to his vice president, Kamala Harris. While Harris may campaign as a moderate, analysis of her voting record does not support that label. Now, remember where this is coming from, City Journal. So not exactly the most conservative of outlets. Quote, in her time in the Senate, Harris positioned herself on the far left of the Democrat Party, already moving sharply to the left. According to DW Nominate, a measure that compares the votes of senators and representatives and ranks members from -1, being most liberal, to 1, being most conservative, Harris is the second most liberal member of the Senate when she served from 2017 to 2021, only behind Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren. In fact, her overall voting record is more liberal than that of Bernie Sanders. Though it is difficult to compare members across time, Harris's score of a -0.7, which is based largely on economic votes, ranks among the more left-wing in American history. Harris's senatorial record differs starkly from that of her boss. While Biden shifted left on entering the White House, he remained a moderate across nearly 4 decades in the Senate. His approximate -0.3 score put him close to the middle of his party throughout his time in the upper chamber. Now, let's consider the rating system for just a second. -1 to 1. So it's a pretty small window there. Only 2 points difference. Now, if you compare that to, say, WyoVote, which ranks candidates -3 to 3, -3 being liberal, 3 being conservative, there's a much more of a range there. So you can get a better gauge as to where your politician is at. When you've only got 2 points there, -1 to 1, it's hard to figure out exactly where these folks are. But given the range with this nominate system that City Journal is referencing, 0 would really be the moderate on there. So when Harris was in the Senate, she introduced and co-sponsored bills that would have dramatically shifted U.S. policy leftward. In 2019, she unveiled a $10 trillion plan to reduce greenhouse gases to 0 by 2045, 5 years faster than proposed in the uber-progressive Green New Deal. Harris also advocated for an end to fracking, a measure that, had it taken effect, would have stopped about 2/3 of all oil production in the United States. As it relates to that, yesterday on the way home from Salt Lake City, there was a news report that said that Harris is now backing away from her stance on banning fracking. Gee, I wonder why. If you're campaigning for the president of the United States, it's probably not a good idea to try to shut down the economy with a ban on pretty much all oil production. But what about healthcare? Now, Kamala Harris was right in line with Obamacare and all of those things, even though she wasn't really all that active in the Senate. You know that she was on board. She's been a solid liberal the entire time that she's been in the U.S. Senate. So it stands to reason that she was absolutely on board with Obamacare and Medicare for all. From the City Journal, quote, her healthcare record is similarly progressive. In 2017, Harris co-sponsored Sanders' Medicare for All bill, which would have ended private insurance in America. It's just the right thing to do, she said, of her support for the bill. In preparation for her 2020 presidential campaign, which, by the way, she never won a single primary and dropped out before Iowa, she released a new plan that would have extended Medicare to all Americans, but that allowed private insurers to offer a plan within a government-run system. Both proposals were on the left of the Democrat Party, even the increasingly liberal party of the last 5 years. Indeed, Harris wasn't even shy about tracking further left than her progressive compatriots, whereas Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's Family Act in 2019 would have provided 3 months of paid family leave at 66% of the worker's salary on taxpayers' dime. Harris proposed supporting up to 6 months of leave at up to 100% of the worker's income. She introduced the Housing is Infrastructure Act in 2019, which would have spent $100 billion on new housing, including $70 billion set aside for publicly owned units. She also supported Sanders' plan to make community, on page 2, colleges and even 4-year public universities free for students from low and income families, despite an exorbitant price tag that Sanders said would amount to at least $48 billion per year. So just on those two issues, Harris is on the far left of anything that we consider even moderate in American politics. So going back to the scale, considering those positions I just read to you, it makes a lot of sense that Biden would appear moderate and Harris would be all the way in the left coast. Interesting where she's from. The then California senator was especially radical during the pandemic. For example, she proposed a $2,000 per month per person free cash for the vast majority of U.S. households. She also introduced a bill that would have capped price increases at 10% during national emergencies. Had it been in force amid the inflationary period after the pandemic, such a policy would have created massive shortages in the economy. Harris's rise to become the likely presidential nominee of the Democrat Party represents in some ways a return to the early days of 2020. In the last presidential campaign, Democrats, scared by the socialist leanings and unlikely electability of the early frontrunner, Bernie Sanders, rallied behind Joe Biden as an unelectable moderate. The irony is now that Democrats worried about Biden's electability and they've rallied behind Harris, whose economic record almost mirrors that of Sanders. Her nomination would represent a triumph of tendencies once relegated to the party's progressive left. So, Kamala Harris really is the darling of the American socialist left. I mean, she's proved it in her policies, and pretty much every bill that she's sponsored or co-sponsored has been one of the dreams of Barry Sanders. The only difference is that Harris is a little bit better looking than old Bernie, and maybe that makes her a little bit more electable. But looking at all the polls, Harris is one of the least liked politicians in the entire United States. And that's saying a lot. I mean, there's characters like Joe Biden, who I don't know anybody that could like that guy, but there are some people. His approval rating kind of hovered around 40% his entire 4 years. I mean, it kind of dipped a little bit below 40 at times. But for Kamala Harris being liked even less than that, she's probably got a lower approval rating than Hillary Clinton, if that's scary enough. I mean, just amazing that the Democrats would try to trot her out. But the biggest reason I think that they've done that is the campaign cash. Because legally, from everything that I can tell, Kamala Harris is the only person that could get her hands on all of that campaign money because she was on the ticket for president of the United States. And, you know, as the vice presidential candidate, I guess they're saying that she could swoop in and snatch all that campaign money. But to me, my friends, doesn't really look like she's going to fare all that well. Like I said, she dropped out before Iowa the last time. So why should we assume that this time is going to be any better? Well, let's see here. We're almost at the bottom of the hour. So let's go ahead and take another break, and then we'll get back to it. watch out. Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. The Independence Network is only going to continue to expand with great voices like me, Just Blame Joey, The Ramble Room, The Hair Affair with Christine, Wide Right Turn, and we're going to continue to add more and more content. So keep everything tuned to the Independence Network. And also, don't forget, you can watch the program on the Ditto Cam on cowboystatepolitics.com or on Facebook, on Twitter, pretty much any YouTube, anywhere you want. Originally I didn't think I was going to like this whole Ditto Cam business, but I think there's some value in you being able to see what's happening in the Cowboy State Politics studio and to see what's going on. I mean, there's a visual representation you can watch. However, I have to have one caveat. I totally agree with Rush that we should be very careful about overloading your senses. Now, the reason why Rush didn't do a lot of video is he always said that the spoken word is by far the best medium, and the reason for that is you only have to use one of your senses at any given time to receive any information, so you can focus on it. You just have to listen to it. But when you have a video podcast or even when you're watching the Ditto Cam, like you are right now, you're using multiple senses. So, you're not really digesting all the information that you can. And so while I resisted having a Ditto Cam for a very, very long time, I'm resisting doing anything else with the Ditto Cam. So anyway, you can watch it on the website and continue on. Well, I thought I'd start out this segment giving you a little bit of a story of one of the things that happened on our honeymoon vacation. So we were in Jackson, and we had dinner plans with some friends. One of the reasons we went to Jackson is a couple of our guests got stuck in airports across the country due to the whole computer meltdown or whatever the heck happened. And, several of them were from Jackson. So we decided we'd go spend a couple days down there. And we had dinner reservations one night, and I suggested that we go out dancing afterwards. It's been a long time since I've been out country dancing. I've got a new wife, so kind of fun to go take the wife out dancing. And so we decided we'd go to the Cowboy Bar, and kind of a really cool venue, but not one of the swankier places in Jackson, as we learned. But anyway, before we went there, I said, well, honey, I need some new clothes. I didn't bring any clothes on our honeymoon to go out to dinner with. So I went and found a new pair of jeans. Well, excuse me. We went looking for jeans downtown and didn't find any. And then we thought, well, why don't we just go to the Boot Barn? So we went there, and lo and behold, there's some cinch jeans, which I have come to really, really like, and a Western shirt. On the Cowboy Bar, we're going to go country dancing, so how does it look like that? And then I said, well, I probably need a new hat to fit in. While I love the Texas Rangers hat, it's not exactly, the right attire for going dancing. And I couldn't very well go buy a cowboy hat because it'd get knocked off while we were dancing, and I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of money on a hat that's going to hit the floor. And so I thought, like a nice Western baseball cap would work perfect. And I'm thinking something like Ariat or Cinch or, one of those type of hats that you would pick up at the Shiptons here in Sheridan. And so we're looking around. We can't find anything around downtown Jackson. And I made the comment to Christine. I said, actually, the perfect hat would be one from King Ropes. And I should have brought one since, do live in Sheridan, and that's where King Ropes is at. And very funny. And we continued looking. Well, finally, we can't find a hat anywhere. And Christine starts Googling it, and she says, well, there's a Big R here. If we were in Sheridan, that would be the place to go. So we walk into Big R, and guess which hat they've got on the shelf? The King Ropes hat. And if you're watching the Ditto Cam, you can see it. But the irony being, it was cheaper in Jackson than it would have been had I gone to King Ropes in Sheridan and bought it. So kind of a funny story. Drive all the way to Sheridan, all the way to Jackson, and the hat I end up finding is one I could have bought, 5 minutes going downtown here in Sheridan. So kind of funny. By the way, I did end up buying a cowboy hat while we were down there. Maybe I'll show that to you one of these days. on the podcast, but really nice black cowboy hat. Been a while since I've had one. So anyway, quick story from the honeymoon vacation. Now, before the break, we were talking about Kamala Harris, and I don't know if you've heard about this or not. I know I talked about it before the wedding, so it was 2 weeks ago. But there's this big thing called Project 2025, and it's being panned in the media by the liberal media as being this like devious, malevolent master plan that the Republicans have put together, and they've lobbed just about every attack you can think of against this thing. But really, the Heritage Foundation has been doing this for a very long time. Anytime there's a new president, they put out a new prescription for liberty-minded governance. They've done this for a lot of years. It's just this year they went a little bit further than they did in previous years, and they've called it Project 2025. Well, the left latched onto it and tried to portray this whole thing as this master plan of the Republicans to, tank democracy. It's basically what they're saying. And they made up a whole bunch of lies about it. That part of the plan was to get rid of Social Security and to throw mama off a cliff and roll grandma down the near steep slope in her wheelchair. And none of which was true, but it was good campaign fodder. And the Harris campaign, the Biden and Harris campaign, and KJP in the White House, they were all over it and saying that it was this terrible thing. Well, the Harris campaign has finally admitted to misleading voters on Project 2025. And this comes to us from the Daily Signal, yet another media outlet that I don't quote all that often. But here we go. Let me read a couple paragraphs to you, then we'll talk about it. Quote, CNN first reported the stunning admission as part of a fact-check article accusing Harris of making false claims about Project 2025 and former President Donald Trump's stance on Social Security. CNN's Daniel Dale revealed, and I quote, and this is a biggie coming from CNN, a Harris campaign official said that the campaign has made a deliberate decision to brand all of Trump's policies as Project 2025, since they believe that it has stuck with voters. Since entering the presidential race Sunday, Harris and her campaign have repeatedly tried to link Project 2025 to Trump, despite the former president's pushback. A few hours before CNN published its fact-check story Wednesday, Trump called links to Project 2025 merely disinformation put out by the radical left Democrat thugs. Do not believe them. And here's his post he made on Truth Social. Quote, I have nothing to do with and know nothing about Project 25. The fact that I do is merely disinformation put out by the radical left Democrat thugs. Do not believe them, DJT. Launched by the Heritage Foundation 2 years ago, Project 2025 has grown to a coalition of 110 conservative organizations developing a transition plan for the next presidential administration. Its work is nonpartisan and available to whomever occupies the White House in January of 2025. CNN's report is the first public admission from Democrats or the Harris campaign that their strategy is to deliberately mislead voters about President Trump. Their attacks on Project 2025 escalated following President Joe Biden's widely panned June 27th debate performance. In response, several media outlets have published fact-check articles disputing Biden's claims, and now those of Kamala Harris. Here's one of them from Project 2025. Breaking. A campaign official for Vice President Harris admitted to CNN that her campaign is deliberately choosing to lie about Project 2025. Quote, a Harris campaign official said the campaign has made a deliberate decision. Okay, blah, 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 blah. CNN, for example, examined Harris's comments at her first campaign rally Tuesday about Project 2025. Quote, when you read it, you will see Donald Trump intends to cut Social Security and Medicare. He intends to give tax breaks to millionaires and big corporations and make working families foot the bill. They intend to end the Affordable Care Act and take us back then to a time when insurance companies had the power to deny people with pre-existing conditions. After reviewing the mandate for leadership, which is what Project 2025 is called, CNN concluded, quote, One of Harris's claims about Project 2025 is false, while another is at best misleading. The Project 2025 document does not show that Trump intends to cut Social Security. The document barely discusses Social Security at all and doesn't propose cuts to the program. In addition, contrary to Harris's suggestion, Project 2025 does not call to end the Affordable Care Act or eliminate its protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Another fact-check article published Wednesday by Verify, a website devoted to stopping the spread of false information, debunked a myth that Project 25 called for the elimination of individualized education plans, known as IEPs. Quote, many readers have asked us if Project 2025 would cut individualized education plans, which are also known as IEPs. Here's what we found. No, Project 2025 wouldn't eliminate individualized education plans. Project 2025 wouldn't get rid of IEPs, which are education plans for students with disabilities. Yet another lie coming from the Harris campaign. Neither Project 2025 nor the Heritage Foundation have called specifically for IEPs to be eliminated. Authors Megan Lowe and Kelly Jones wrote, IEPs aren't mentioned anywhere in the Mandate for Leadership, a Conservative Promise, which outlines the plan for the project. Previously, a USA Today fact-check article rated false the Democrats' claim that Project 2025 is a plan from Trump. Quote, Project 2025 is a political playbook created by the Heritage Foundation and dozens of other conservative groups, not President Trump, who said he disagrees with elements of the efforts. Despite these and other fact-check articles, Harris's campaign and the Democrat National Committee continued to make false assertions about Project 2025 as of publication of this Daily Signal story. And the rest of it just goes on with the rest of the tweets. But it's clear that the Biden administration before and the Harris campaign now are made it a concerted effort to lie about President Trump, to lie about the Heritage Foundation, and to lie about Project 2025. The truth is, if you read Project 2025 and not just listen to what they're saying in the media, you'll conclude that it really is a good conservative plan for any administration, a liberty-minded, personal responsibility type plan to get our nation back on track, both economically and socially. There's no reason why you would disregard it. It's not nefarious in any way. It's just an example of the media and the Democrats trying to mislead you about something that would be absolutely effective in just about any way, shape, or form in our country. And again, it's just the Democrats. They don't have any other arguments except just to lie. And so that's what they're doing. And Democrat politicians, it's like I say, their main modus operandi is just to lie to you continually. And that's why you got to continually fact check all of this stuff. And as it relates to fact checking, don't take my word for any of this stuff. The reason why I tell you where you can find the articles on the live program is so that you'll go read them for yourself. So you'll find out what is true and what the facts are. That way, when you're talking to your friends and neighbors about it, you can talk from an educated position and say, well, no. According to the Daily Signal, here's what Harris has been saying about Project 2025. The same is true, and this is a great segue into this next topic. And I haven't really looked at too much in depth about this, but there is a new PAC, and actually, it's the PAC isn't new. It's just they've just recently come on the scene in this election. The Prosperity and Commerce PAC. Anyway, it was tweeted out by Governor Mark Gordon, and I got a text from it yesterday, and it's saying, make sure you fact check everything these politicians are saying. And let's see here. Where find it? Maybe here. Yep, here we go. Anyway, it lists all of the liberal politicians in the state and asks you to contact them directly. But the interesting thing about it is none of these liberal politicians, here we go, really want you to fact check anything That's why they tell you, oh, go look at my website for my voting record. Don't go look at Wild or any of these other places. Look at what I say. Well, so anyway, I mentioned there was a text that was sent out by Governor Mark Gordon. Here's what it says, quote, "Hello, this is Governor Mark Gordon. Primaries are ramping up. It's time to heed the wisdom of one of our greatest Republican presidents, Ronald Reagan. Trust but verify. This election year, Wyoming is seeing unprecedented mailings, texts, emails, and calls. Telling half-truths and outright lies doesn't work for the good people of Wyoming. So visit Fact Check Wyoming before you cast your 2024 primary ballot and learn about who will protect our way of life. We've done great work for Wyomingites. Let's keep it up." And then there's a link to Fact Check Wyoming, which again, the only thing it does is lists all the contact information for all the liberal politicians in the state. And it's another example of, being aware of what you're reading. And like I say, none of the conservatives are listed on here. It's all the liberal Democrats who can't spell in the Wyoming legislature. So be aware, know what you know. Let's see what else I got on this site here. Nothing, right? About, it all goes back to the same site. So anyway, pay no attention to the text that you even get from the governor. He is going to mislead you about a whole bunch of different stuff. So anyway, can't even trust the governor, which, okay, so he campaigned as a conservative, and we all know that he's a left-leaning greenie from way back in his Sierra Club days. Well, let's get back to Kamala Harris for a minute. I'm not quite done with her on today's program. From the Conservative Daily News, it's entitled, "By the way, Kamala Harris is a dangerous authoritarian." Now, again, take everything that I say with a grain of salt and go verify it for yourself. Anytime you hear a headline that says, "Oh, they're a dangerous authoritarian," you probably should treat that with a little bit of skepticism. But let's get into the article. We'll see if it's actually worth the paper that I printed it on. And I quote, "With some hard work, pluck, the right boyfriend, and a bit of genetic luck, Kamala Harris has found her way onto the presidential ballot without having to secure a single primary vote. Don't tell me the American dream is dead." This is by David Harriside, by the way. Sure, Harris is a demagogue who speaks in cringy, swirling, impenetrable platitudes. And sure, according to President Joe Biden, Harris was an identity hire. But Morning Joe says we're not supposed to talk about any of that. So let's discuss her record and stated positions. It seems like a lifetime ago that Biden named Harris his running mate. What you may not recall is that the media tried to gaslight us into believing that the California senator was another apolitical deal maker. Former Clinton fixer George Stephanopoulos said Harris was, quote, "the middle-of-the-road moderate wing of the Democrat Party." The New York Times called her a pragmatic moderate, while the Associated Press focused on her centrist record, and so on. Now, remember, the article that I read to you, parts of it, I read to you before the break, talking about her actual record, things that she sponsored in Congress and co-sponsored. None of those things are moderate, nor are they anywhere close to the middle of the road. They're all far left dreams of Bernie Sanders. A small C conservative, one Washington Post columnist wrote that the only problem was, according to GovTrack, Harris's record in the Senate was to the left of red diaper baby Bernie Sanders. She was least likely of any senator to join in any bipartisan bills. Now that's fine. Bipartisan bills are the pits. Harris wasn't handed a Senate seat by her former beau and California political kingpin Willie Brown to waste her time legislating with a bunch of pinheads. She was there to run for the presidency. In her truncated first term, few excelled more at smearing her political opponents than Kamala Harris. Remember when Harris moderately accused Brett Kavanaugh of gang rape? This false perception of moderation stems from Harris's time as prosecutor and attorney general. Harris liked to brag about using a, quote, huge stick as a prosecutor in San Francisco, where she regularly threatened poor parents with jail time in her efforts to craft social policy, which, by the way, was not her job as the prosecutor. Um, it's true that Harris threw a lot of people in jail to bolster her political fortunes. Some of them likely were innocent. And judging from her disposition, she would throw a lot more people in jail if she could. But when pro life journalist David Daleiden published videos of Planned Parenthood executives nonchalantly discussing the selling of baby parts, Harris had his home raided, seized evidence, and then tried to throw him in prison. She later teamed up with the abortion mill to write legislation that would squash the free speech rights of other pro lifers. Like any good authoritarian, Harris enforces whatever law she sees fit to enforce, whether she sees fit or not. One of the reasons Harris allegedly opposed the nomination of Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch was that the judge, quote, consistently valued narrow legalisms, which is to say, respected the Constitution. Now, the piece goes on and on. But the reality is that Kamala Harris is not the conservative that she claims to be, nor is she a moderate. She's way to the left, over there hanging out with Bernie Sanders and sponsoring all of his crazy leftist legislation. Medicare for all, the Green New Deal. Remember the universal basic income she tried to put in place during COVID, where everybody gets $2,000 every month. We are talking about a radical socialist who, just since yesterday, I guess, has decided that she's now in favor of fracking, which before she said that she wasn't. A classic John Kerry, I was in favor of this before I was against this, before I was in favor of it. So, you shouldn't have any illusion about Kamala Harris. You shouldn't vote for her because she's a DEI hire, because that's exactly what she was. And, we should just continue to pay attention to what these politicians say and what they do and focus on their voting records. Now, there's an interesting piece, and this is one of those, I kind of go back and forth on it because I don't really like agreeing with Rod Miller all that much. But he's got another piece that I agree with, and it's entitled, Wyoming is a news desert with a hell of a lot of rain. The truth is, Wyoming isn't a news desert, as Wyoming Public Radio and Wyoming Public Media wants you to believe, which is what he's talking about here. You just have to go and look for the news and actually report on it. I just looked at the clock. Let's go ahead and take our last break, and then we'll get back and get into this article. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy state politics microphone, documented to be almost always right, just about 99% of the time, which is a record that the mainstream media shouldn't even try to approach, because quite frankly they can't, because they're wrong all the time. And if you need any proof of this whatsoever, answer me this one question. Riddle me this, riddle me that. Show me one article where the Cowboy State Daily has been critical of any redcoat. By critical, I mean criticizing their votes or their actions or their speeches or anything. Now, they do that all the time if you're a conservative, but not if you're a redcoat. I challenge you to find one of them. I doubt very seriously that you'll be able to. Anyway, before the break, I was telling you how there's this new piece out by Rod Miller that I happen to agree with. And he's talking about an interview with Cindy Price Schultz, who is the head of the UW journalism department. And she's also, she was doing an interview with Wyoming Public Radio. And she's claiming that Wyoming is a news desert. And let me just quote you what Rod says here, because I think that he's absolutely right on the money. Quote, if she's talking about the slow death of print journalism, the daily newspapers that once thudded on porches all across the Big Empty, she's correct. The nostalgic days of newsprint and paperboys are gone, and they ain't coming back. Here's a case in point. The Casper Star Tribune was once the flagship newspaper of the Cowboy State, and in its heyday, had a circulation of about 30,000 or so. Today, it's a tiny fraction of that. Schultz correctly identifies the factors that are causing print journalism in Wyoming to wither on the vine, and I will add, and die. But to call Wyoming a news desert is fake news. More folks are reading Wyoming news today than ever before, and we're going to skip a paragraph here. Digital media outlets are replacing paper and ink news sources as we speak. You're reading this rant on a digital media news source. I rest my case. The news organ for which I write, Cowboy State Daily, or the Cowpie, has a circulation of about 72,000 subscribers. That's their daily newsletter. I'm not saying everybody reads that. They probably don't. And more than 130,000 Facebook followers. That doesn't equate to circulation either. But here's the important point I wanted to bring up. And the Cowboy State Daily is not the only paperboy on the block. There are a handful of statewide digital outlets and a myriad of local organizations that provide news via electrons rather than newsprint through regular digital productions, podcasts, blogs, and other means. He is absolutely right. There is a plethora of news outlets that you can find just about anywhere, this program being one of them. The Independence Network, you got more information there about this election than anywhere else in the entire Cowboy State. In fact, I don't think that there's been a media outlet that has interviewed as many people as we have. And I don't think there's any of them that have come close. So don't listen to Wyoming Public Media or the ditzes down at the University of Wyoming. They really don't have any idea what's happening in the news business in Wyoming. The Independence Network is continuing to expand. I can tell you for a fact that the Cowboys state politics is continuing to expand. And so, I mean, really, there's news out there if you want to find it. But the important point is that you don't trust any of them, including everything I've said today and everything that is said on the Independence Network. Verify your facts. Go read the stuff for yourself. Don't listen to what I say. I promise you, if you're in a room and you say, because David said so, you're going to be laughed out of the room, regardless of if I'm right or not, which I'm almost always right. But anyway, go read the stuff for yourself. Learn what it is to be right and know the arguments. And that way, when you're talking about it down at your coffee club or in the bar, you can get the facts straight, and you can correct some of this bull crap that comes out of the Cowpie and out of the Red Star, the Casper Star Tribune, because they're not telling you the truth. I guarantee it. Well, we've burned up another busy broadcast hour on the program. Once again, I'm happy to be back in the saddle right behind the silver microphone. Stick around. You've got the new Cowboy State Politics podcast out today. Tomorrow, I'm interviewing Gail Simmons. Oh, I can't tell you how excited I am about that. I'm going to ask her some of the original questions I did from 4 years ago and see how she answers this time. It's going to be a great interview, but that'll do it for me. Joey Carenti is coming up next. See you tomorrow.